So, Danny Flex from Seconds Out, delighted to be joined by Frank Smith, someone many people consider the thinking man's Eddie Hearn. I certainly do.
We were going to say the good-looking man's Eddie Hearn.
Well, yeah, that too. Well, not the good-looking man's Eddie Hearn, because that would be a bit weird, wouldn't it? But yeah, the good-looking Eddie Hearn.
True.
The young Eddie Hearn.
Yeah, the
just
younger...
the one and only Frank Smith, maybe.
The younger, chubbier version.
I don't know, well, he used to be quite chubby. You just haven't been in boxing quite as long yet, so you'll get there. Trust me, it'll ruin you. It'll ruin you. Hasn't done to me apparently, but I'm still waiting.
I am the chubbier version.
yeah. Well, not only for now. Last time we heard about the next show Matchroom are bringing out, it was scheduled for the end of September, and Eddie talked about there being it being put forward as a test event to the government for allowing fans back in. Since then, we've seen some of the restrictions revolving around the pandemic heightened, or even gone back to how it was previously. How does that affect things? And have you heard anything back about that proposal?
That we've been working and waiting to see, working with the DCMS on our boxing events, as well as a number of other events, across the sports we promote. I think, obviously yesterday's news and yesterday's announcement around updates of legislations, regulations, etc., that probably will affect it. So we were pushing hard to try and do an event or a test event with crowd, but now we're looking, it's very, very likely that will be almost definitely behind closed doors, and hopefully announced tomorrow in the next couple of days.
And still towards the end of September, still with Josh Buatsi in the main event?
Yeah, towards the end of September, possibly could move into the first week of October. Is possible, but yeah, Joshua Buatsi still headlining, so we'll have news on his opponent very shortly. Everything's set, everything's in place, the fighters have been training. The big difference with this is, we don't have to sell tickets, unfortunately. So, we can use this time to make sure we get it right and get the setup together. But everyone's been prepared. The fighters have had a lot of notice, so all is fine on that front. And
you're going to know the opponent. You may already know the opponent, but everyone's going to know the opponent soon. But by the time this comes out on Seconds Out, it'll probably be common knowledge. You don't have to tell me who it is, but is it going to be a step up for Buatsi? Is it going to be a step into world class, perhaps, for Buatsi?
I think it's going to be, it's going to be a good test, bearing in mind the time that Buatsi's had out the ring. It was unfortunate he had to pull out of the last fight he was supposed to have with injury, and you've obviously had a long period out with the COVID delays. So, it's going to be a good test for him to come back, and he's going to aim to also be back out in December, hopefully, on the AJ undercard as well. So, the key is for him is to keep him active. He's still very young in his career. So get this fight back out there. I'm sure shake off the ring rust, and then, it'll probably be a bigger fight towards the end of the year.
Let's talk about fight camp. Obviously, a great period in some ways. Obviously, not with the pandemic going on, but a great spectacle. How do you feel now, looking back on it, about how much you guys achieved in putting that together, and what were the biggest challenges involved?
Yeah, no, look, it was a great event. It couldn't have gone much better, or great 4 weeks of events. Everything that we wanted it to do, it did. It delivered for boxing, it delivered for the sport, for the fighters, and for the Matchroom brand as well, which is important for us. The work we've put in over the years, we wanted to continue that. We did everything we could in terms of the production, the staging. We made it look as great as we could within the limited, within the restrictions. And I think out of all sports that have come back, it was probably one of the best and most innovative ideas that we've seen. And that, it delivered upon. The most important thing was the fights were bloody decent. Every fight, it's all well and good us putting fights on, and this is going to be great, but you have to get lucky with them as well. They have to gel. And I can't really think of, one that wasn't entertaining. All 4 weeks we had 20 fights in total, and all 4 weeks delivered. The fighters delivered, and it went really well. And I'd say the toughest test of it, obviously there was the regulations around COVID. There was the spending a long time in the Holiday Inn on the edge of the A12. I'm not sure it was everyone's dream of a summer holiday. especially not everyone who worked for us. But I think it all together, you know, everything came together. It was a fun environment within testing times. So yeah, it couldn't have gone much better, to be honest. And the only thing that's come out bad is the bloody grass.
Right. I imagine that's more of a concern for Eddie and the family than you.
Yeah, I'm not on grass duty.
Yeah, you're not the groundsman of the match.
The only thing I can't do.
Yeah, we finally found your weakness. Looking ahead, there's obviously some big fights to come from Matchroom for the rest of the year. Just taking them in turn, we're waiting for the rescheduled date for Derek Chisora and Alexander Usyk. Is that going to take place here? Is it going to be over in the US? And when, roughly, is it likely to be?
We're working through that now. We're working with the teams to see what can be done. You know, obviously, the big problem is, as we know, not having a gate makes it very difficult for especially the biggest fights to happen. So we're speaking to the teams currently and, you know, hopefully have some kind of update on that soon. But no set date just yet.
And Dillian Whyte, Povetkin rematch, looking like November from what we've been told. Have you got any concerns? This is something that's been raised by a number of people on social media and journalists as well. Have you got any concerns about Dillian Whyte returning perhaps too soon from that defeat? Not just physically, but I suppose mentally and emotionally as well, having suffered that surprise defeat.
You know, firstly, as you say, November is the time we're aiming for that rematch. When you speak about, and I know, you know, a lot of people have mentioned it around him returning within this time frame. When you look at the fight itself, he didn't take huge punishment in terms of to his body. You know, he was winning the fight, he was controlling it, and you know, he got caught with a shot, an amazing shot. You can't take that away from Alexander Povetkin. He did what he goes in there to do. He was looking for that, and he got it. Mentally, you know, Dillian's been there before. He's been through very hard times, for, you know, especially around the Rivas situation. You know, at that point, his career could have been over, and he rightly came out of that after, you know, everything that went on. He lost against Anthony Joshua and came back from that strong as well. So he's mentally one of the strongest characters there is. You know, if you say, should a fighter come straight back after a stoppage like that, then AJ wouldn't be the, you know, unified world heavyweight champion right now.
There was a longer time frame, though, in fairness.
Yeah, it was 6 months.
Rather than 3 months.
So you've got 3.5 months, you know, 3.5, 4 months roughly, you know, once we figure out. But I think the difference is, I don't think there is really a difference. He's going back in there. He's gone straight back into his running to keep him fit. You know, so he knows his body and he knows himself better than anyone. So I'm sure if he wasn't ready, or he said, you know what, I don't feel like it right now, he'd make the sensible decision. He's a very intelligent guy. He's worked his way back to where he is. And I don't think there's emotion behind it, because when you've seen his interviews, when you've seen him talk about it, he's not angry or he's not emotional about it. He's just, I know what I need to do to win, and I'm ready to get back in there. You know, this is probably one of the biggest fights in his career to come back from that defeat. If he wasn't in the right place, I don't think he'd risk that position. You know, because ultimately, if he loses again, it's not the end of his career, but it's a big dent on where he's built himself up to, because then he has to rebuild again. So, you know, I think it's the right decision, and, you know, you have to commend him, because he took a hard fight in the first place. Everyone knows how tough Alexander Povetkin is, and he wants to go straight back in there.
AJ Pulev in December. You mentioned hoping that Josh Buatsi goes on that show. Any ideas who else might be on the show? There were rumours perhaps of Claressa Shields coming over and fighting Savannah Marshall, who's obviously in action next month.
Yeah, well, Savannah's going to fight next month, so maybe a bit too soon, but possibly. But, you know, you've also got Lawrence Coley as well. He's got, you know, a big possible title shot. Yeah, the Source. So for the WBO world title, which unfortunately should have happened a while ago, but, you know, there's obviously, with everything going on, been a few delays, and a few other fights going on there as well. I think we're spending the time right now just plotting out all of our fighters and plotting out what the rest of the year looks like. You know, we're restricted to a certain extent because we can only do 7 fights a card currently. So, you know, we need to make sure we can get everyone out, you know, and make sure they're busy, kept as busy as we can do this year.
A lot of people commented after Dillian Whyte lost to Povetkin, and probably not the best time to have done it straight after the fight, but a lot of people were happy in a way because it seemed to clear one of the obstacles in the way of the super fight everyone wants to see at heavyweight, or certainly everyone in the UK, between Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. Did you view it that way, or are there still quite a lot of complications before that fight can be made?
The fight's still got to be made, you know, the detail of it's still got to be done. You know, there's in essence, there's a split there, but, you know, as well, Tyson Fury's still got to beat Deontay Wilder in a rematch.
Sure.
You know, and that's not taking anything away from Tyson Fury, but heavyweight boxing, as we've seen time and time again, anything can happen. AJ's still got to go in there and beat Kubrat Pulev, which I believe he does. But, you know, there's a lot of things that need to be done, and then there's a lot of detail that needs to be worked out around the undisputed fight itself. So I think also at the time, you know, when it happened with Dillian losing, I don't think there was much, or at that point, there's much thought around, you know, that position, etc. It was more, is he all right? And he wants to get straight back in and get the win again.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah. I was like, I don't think that quickly.
Yeah. One thing I did want to ask you, I was at a press conference a couple of days ago for the Anthony Yard fight that's taking place this weekend. And George Warren was asked about the Dubois-Joyce pay-per-view. And John Rawlings said to him, well, the other side, meaning you guys, have put on a pay-per-view, a heavyweight fight with no fans in attendance. So surely that means that Dubois-Joyce can be made without any fans in attendance. He said anything's feasible, but he thinks it deserves a crowd. Now, from your point of view, I'm sure you believe that Whyte Povetkin deserved the crowd, especially in hindsight, having seen what happened. So my question to you is, Dubois-Joyce, should that be pushed ahead for this year regardless, like if you were in their position?
Yeah, I think they should try and make it happen. I think, you know, if they want to make that fight, it's a great fight between two guys. I guess for them financially, it's very hard, you know, to make it happen. And the fighters have to a certain element understand. But the truth is, I suppose it's probably the biggest fight of both those guys' careers. And it's again, I think there's too much put on a loss for a fighter these days. But in their heads, this is, right, I've got to go in there and win because this catapults me up here, and the other one is sort of back down again. It can be done. The fights can be made without a crowd. Don't get me wrong, it's not easy, but it can be done. You know, I think one of the difficulties they will have there is obviously they're still very early on in their careers, and they don't have the audience, and they haven't been built to the level to do big numbers, I believe, anyway. That's taking nothing away from them as people, both lovely guys and great fighters. But, you know, unfortunately, it doesn't always sell the fight to what they need it to do.
So is that why you guys were confident putting on a pay-per-view without a crowd present? Because you trusted the saleability, if you like, or marketability of Dillian Whyte and Alexander Povetkin?
I mean, look, ultimately, there was a lot of risk taken, and a lot of that risk was taken by Dillian Whyte as well. So all credit for him for believing in himself. You know, we believe we do a good job promoting the show. Sky Sports do an amazing job as well. So, you know, there was always going to be an element of risk, but we saw what could be done. But don't get me wrong, it still is affected by losing 18,000 ticket sales at the O2 Arena, which that would have done that fight. So, you know, there's negatives to it, but we wanted to make it happen, and to his credit, Dillian Whyte wanted to make it happen.
I mean, talking about that, and I think a lot of people out there still don't realise this, Dillian Whyte was taking a risk on two fronts, not just in the fight itself with Povetkin, but from a commercial perspective as well, because you guys have this model, you could probably explain it a lot better than me, but the headliner on certain shows gets kind of ownership of the show, if you like, and works with the budgets and the undercard and stuff.
Yeah, so for certain fighters, when they get to a certain commercial level, we basically it's essentially a profit share of the event, and all the income goes in, all the expenses go in. We talk about everything, we work through everything, and the fighter gets their fair share. Now, I think if you compare it to, the likes of UFC, I suppose, where there's a lot of talk around the financial splits not being fair for the fighters, and I know there's a lot of things going on at the minute, not that I can comment, so I don't know enough about it. But this makes sure that the fighters feel that they get their fair share. And more, not that it's more than their fair, but they get what they deserve. And also, they get to see everything. They get to understand, right, I can see now why I maybe wasn't worth that, but I can see I'm getting my value. Yeah. Because basically the work I put in reflects in, the pay-per-view sales. Am I going to push it a bit more because it's directly associated to my income? It's like anyone. If someone said, if someone said to me, if you go out and give 1 million flyers out, I'll pay you an extra, you might get an extra £1 to go. I'll go and give out the flyers. The same, on an easier, smaller basis. Yeah. But it works well because, it builds the trust with the fighters. They, as I say, they get to see everything, and they get what they deserve from it.
And is that something you mention when you're in discussions with signing new fighters as well? That obviously they're not at that stage or anywhere near them, but that one day that could be in their future, because that's got to be a unique selling point against other promoters who might be interested who don't do that model.
Yeah, I think essentially you have to have a long-term view as a fighter, and not every fighter has that. Some fighters have different, they want to get paid early. They want to get the money straight away. I think, when you look at some of our big names we've worked with over the years, and if you speak to them, I'm sure they feel like it's worked well for them going down that route. But at the same time, fighters take risk as well. They take risk in the event because, there's not a guarantee. And they then, if it doesn't go very well, it affects them directly. So, it can go either way. Fortunately, it goes the right way most of the time.
And is there kind of where the fighter takes that added risk, is there the flip side on your side, Matchroom, not just you personally, where the risk, not the risk, but the pressure and the responsibility lessens a little bit so you guys can focus on other areas like pushing the show?
Yeah, the responsibility, I had this conversation with someone the other day. The responsibility and that side of things never goes away because ultimately we're the ones who have to answer to the fighters. Essentially as well, we have to maximise all revenue. We are incentivised as well by the show to do as well as it possibly can. I spoke to someone the other day and said, it doesn't matter whose money it is, whether it's mine, Matchroom's, or a fighter owning the show. I have the same mentality with it. I don't, we don't do a fighter show and go spend an extra 300 quid on this. Everything is to the point of, right, can we get 25 quid off that? Like, it's quite painful, to be honest. I wouldn't like to be on, when I hear, it's from hotel rooms. They're 100 quid. Right, can we get them for 80 quid? It's every single line item you see in a budget is pushed back on, because as much as we've got to bring in a revenue, we've also got to save costs. And this has been a big time for that as well, reflecting on previous shows and looking at, right, where can we moving forward? Where can we make changes? Because essentially businesses, I think, always forget about where you can make savings. It's always, where can we bring in more revenue? It's never really, right, could we not have spent that 20 quid there? And that's because doing 50 shows a year, it adds up. So, it doesn't change whoever's show it is. We have the same mentality.
I guess the 50 shows a year thing as well, though, there is an advantage to that in that there's a certain amount of collective bargaining with travel and other elements of your cost base.
Yeah, no, of course. And also take away just boxing, but our business as a whole across 10, 11 different sports. When we work together and can join up across those sports, that really helps as well. And that's from all sides. That's from income, bringing in partners who may not necessarily be interested in something, but saying, I want to get involved across the board. How can we work with them? You know, that works that way as well.
And the same with Sky Sports as your broadcast partner, I guess, and DAZN in the US, in that maybe not so much with DAZN, they're just starting to crack the market in the US, but certainly with Sky Sports, the large number of sports they cover, there's a lot of cross-promotional opportunity there.
Yeah, no, that's something we always work closely with Sky with, and DAZN as well, you know, across how can we work together with other rights holders they work with, you know, football being a great one. What can we do with the football clubs? You know, they have a lot of access as Sky, but across all sports, and even internally with our own sports. How can we bring the darts players in with the boxers? What can we do with the snooker players? Sometimes it doesn't always fit, but we will always try and look at it and see, you know, how we can work through it. I don't think people always realise how many different things we're involved in, you know, from gymnastics to netball, to fishing, to golf, to snooker. You know, there's such a wide range of things we're involved in.
And just talking about DAZN, there's been a lot of talk about them recently, most recently this week with the lawsuit put out by Canelo's team. But there's been talk about DAZN for a long time regarding their financial security. Obviously, the owner is financially secure, robust, you would say. But, you know, he's got a huge amount of money. But whether the company itself, its longevity has come into question, I think. You speak to people from DAZN on quite a regular basis, I'd imagine. What sense do you get from them about how confident they are in the long-term viability of the broadcaster?
Yeah, look, I can't speak directly on behalf of DAZN. I don't work for DAZN, but I do know from my relationship with them and working with them day in, day out, they're in a very good place. You know, every business has been affected by COVID. You know, so when people talk about people letting off staff or this, that, the other, you know, every business has been affected by. You can't shut your eyes and say everything's fine, because it's not. You know, and that's ultimately across the board in any industry. And this, more than anything, has hit every industry there is. But, you know, from working with them day in, day out, talking to them day in, day out, is that everything's in a good place. You know, we're working through our schedule now, very close to announcing the rest of the year. And, you know, everyone can question things, have their opinion on things, but a lot of people don't actually understand the ins and outs and what goes into making it. You look at a company like, I don't know, Netflix, for example, who invested billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars over many years, and it has ended up where it is now. Yeah. These companies, they have heavy investment, and they have very intelligent people who are involved in doing so and putting these plans together. So, you know, as I say, everyone has an opinion on it, but these people know what they're doing. And, you know, the group of the investors behind DAZN, as you mentioned, very financially sound. And, you know, have invested heavily already into the product and the brand. And I'm sure will continue to do so. You know, people talking about, oh, this doesn't sound good, that doesn't sound good. It's very hard to understand the inside of a business if you don't work in it day in, day out. But I suppose everyone's allowed their opinion these days, and, you know, we'll take certain elements and snippets of news and take something from that.
Of course. That's the world of social media, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, you can't get away from it now. It's great in many ways, isn't it? But in other ways, it's not great.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Really appreciate your time, especially in an evening. I'm sure you're very busy, but much appreciated. And look forward to seeing you, hopefully, at a press conference, if we're allowed one, sometime soon.
Good to catch up, mate.
Cheers, mate. Take care.